and welcome to the Bald Ambition Podcast. I am your bald host, Mookie Spitz, and the ambition that I'll be discussing today is understanding that customers don't care about you. Of course, that sounds paradoxical when we're trying to sell, when we're trying to induce behavioral change through our product, our service, our company, our personality. But that belief, that understanding, that fact that customers don't care about us is absolutely foundational for consultative selling. Over the past couple months, I've had a wide array of guests on the pod. Everyone from startup founders to consultants, brand strategists to millennials and Gen Z Zoomers. And I tried to offer up various points of view that are, in a sense, mirrors in a funhouse journey, reflecting back on each other, reflecting back on our chaotic market and times. We live in a highly volatile environment right now. And it's more important now than ever before to differentiate ourselves, to construct messaging which is simple and clear and impactful and ideally suited for the digital environment where seconds are a lifetime, as most folks are on their mobile phones, swiping, tapping, and flowing through a tsunami of daily content. So, how does one cut through the noise? How do we differentiate? How do we offer up benefits which resist objection and ultimately engender that call to action, the ultimate KPI? Getting folks to buy, getting folks to engage, getting folks to tap, swipe, click in our favor. Well, as I'm harping here, the very first step, however contradictory it might sound, is to understand that the customer does not care. Now, what do I mean by this? What I mean is the obvious, that all human beings have their own self-interests at heart. They care only, or for the most part, exclusively, about maximizing their advantage. And if they see you in any way meaningful, then you become an agent, a partner, a vehicle for their success, their transformation, their conversion, their sale, their benefit. Now, why do I bring this up as foundational for consultative selling, especially in our digital age, especially in our chaotic market environment? I bring it up because most salespeople, most products, most services, most companies do the opposite. They obsessively present the details of what we would consider their features and advantages, and often rush into the benefits prematurely. So, for example, someone walks into the lot of a car dealership. The salespeople leap on the fresh meat. The customer doesn't care about the cars per se. Again, this sounds counterintuitive. They have entered the car dealership because they are seeking a new car, but they do so for a host of reasons that the salesperson has no idea thereof. Is the customer looking to upgrade due to a new family member? Is the customer now suddenly single, wanting to trade in the sedan for a hot, racier midlife crisis car? Obviously, the task of the salesperson isn't to throw them into the first random vehicle for a test drive and give them a spin. It's to engage them in conversation and dialogue to understand their needs, their pain, their expectations, and then take them to the vehicle which satisfies their need, assuages their pain, and offers them the benefit of buying a new automobile. That sounds basic and almost too banal to talk about, but this mistake is made over and over and over again by sales strategists, content strategists, people putting together messaging for their product, their service, their company, their own career. I see it all the time. You see it all the time. Most of us do it all the time. We have a tendency of resorting almost instinctively, habitually, to talk about ourselves. If you go to a typical company website, we, the first person plural. We do this. Our product does that. Where is the customer engagement? Where is the opening salvo of building trust, coming to understand what the customer is looking for, the why behind the how of their visit? Over and over again, I see this everywhere when I work with clients who hire me to provide brand strategy, sales strategy, content strategy. 98% of the time, the bar is set low because the bar is set where most folks are psychologically, emotionally, and strategically. Me. I need to be like that fancy bird in the jungle, strutting its feathers to attract a mate. The peacock out in the field, strutting around, extending that plume, thinking that by exerting that energy, it'll draw the ideal mate. Most people selling, most people constructing anything from a website to a tweet think this way. If only I can represent myself in the most flattering way possible, then I will get attention, sustain it, and engender an action which will result in a sale, or at least kick the can down further in the sales process. But unless you are doing this in a thoroughly commoditized environment where it's patently obvious what the customer is looking for, and the competition is based usually on price alone, because the features and advantages and benefits of this commoditized product or service are so similar across the market that none of this matters. So you leap right to the differentiator with the tacit assumption that the customer already knows exactly what they're looking for, and you can move the needle, you could tip the scale, you can get them to buy from you and not the other guy because you're 5 cents cheaper, you deliver in 2 days instead of 3, and you differentiate based on the immediacy of these commoditized differentiators. But for most of the selling that we're interested in here, where the product, service, company, career, expertise, personality is complex based on multiple factors and of a level of sophistication and cost that warrant the consultative approach to selling. It's the opposite of a commoditized transaction. It's a relationship that we build with the customer base over time, based first and foremost on the belief that we are there to understand their challenges and problems and pain points, and by doing so, can craft often a custom tailored solution to meet their needs to get them to where they want to go. And in order to do that, it's not about the commoditized differentiators. It's not about 2-day instead of 3-day delivery, 5 cents or 10 cents cheaper on the bundle. It's about a conversation and a process of doing exactly that. It involves asking questions, getting to know the customer, and in that process, building trust, creating a relationship which is centered on strategic partnership and not a quick transaction. But again, I see it over and over. And some of the biggest companies and brands on the planet make this mistake over and over again. They zero in on the features of their product or service in the desperate attempt to get attention and to differentiate from their competitors. And they forego in their communications, in their messaging, in their engagement strategies, this approach to turning attention away from themselves, their company, their product, their service, and instead focusing on the needs and expectations, the hopes, the dreams, the desires, and also the pain and suffering of the customer in search of a solution in the form of what that seller is offering. Now, this can get a little bit confusing when we consider some iconic brands and products. For example, Apple. Apple is one of the most recognized brands on the planet. Their iconic campaign, Think Different, and their iconic ad, the 1984 ad, where you had a young, lithe runner literally shattering through a wall, breaking out of the Orwellian constraints of the old way of doing things with color, with brightness, with youthfulness and opportunity was revolutionary. And it equated the brand with this sense of liberation, of freedom, of modernity. And it reinforced their byline, think different. And the think different was pretty much an imperative of Apple to its customers. It was focused on their customer. It wasn't, we make you think different. It wasn't, we are different. It was an imperative. It was a rallying cry to customers for them to be courageous enough to think different and embrace everything that this exciting brand was about. Welcome to transformation. Total genius. Total genius. Now, that's the foundation for the brand. And over the years, it's become ingrained and iconic. Conversely, however, if you look at any given random Apple ad, whether it's for the new iPhone, iPad, earbuds, just about anything from this multi-trillion-dollar market capped, world recognized behemoth of a company, what do these ads do? They focus on the features and advantages. They don't even get to the benefits. The new iPhone is thinner than the old iPhone. Wonderful photography. Oh my God, look how skinny this new iPhone is. They rarely, if ever, focus on happy people using the iPhone or even spend much time at all dwelling on what that skinniness can do for you. It's all about worshiping the product. It's like tech porn. That's what Apple does. So this can become confusing because this is the exact opposite of what I'm espousing. It's the exact opposite of a consultative sell. This iPhone is skinnier, faster, cooler looking. Look, they moved the bezel, whatever the hell that is, from the bottom to the top. We changed a couple buttons on it. And I scratch my chin trying to differentiate the iPhone 15 from the 16, and you kind of wonder how high these numbers are going to go. And yet, it is the number one technology product, consumer electronics product on planet Earth. And its brand equity is incomparable. So what the hell is Mookie talking about? Well, I use this as a counterexample to illustrate that this approach back to the commoditization of product, turning the consumer into a techno fetishist, is only possible with that kind of reputation already entrenched in the mind of the consumer. Another facet of this is the epitome of the benefit itself is implicit within the cool factor of the device. This can be attributable back to Steve Jobs himself, who saw technology as the ultimate synergy or fusion between hardware, software, and user. You had Michael Dell, who believed in hardware. You had Bill Gates, who believed in software. And you had Steve Jobs, who ended up winning the battle when he said any kind of differentiation or fragmentation or siloing between these elements that go into a consumer electronic product are a waste of time and they get in the way of world dominion. The Sony Corporation is another great counterexample. Remember the Walkman, which was basically a mobile cassette tape player. You could clip it to your belt and you could pop in a cassette tape and hit play and walk around outside with headphones. Now, what this simple enough gadget did was it combined the main elements that Jobs subsequently used to take over the planet. Number one, it was mobile. It was technology that wasn't the size of a suitcase that had to sit in a room, but you took it with you. It was, in a sense, attached to your body. Mobility. And with that, flexibility and ubiquity. Number two, music. And more generalized, media. You had a mobile gadget which went around with you that could deliver media. In this case, it was music, but it was essentially data in the form that you would absorb into your headphones wherever the hell you went. Now, what was missing here was content. But here's the real tragedy of the Sony story. Sony licensed music, bands. They created and distributed mountains of content. But instead of uniting all of these energies and powers and benefits, mobility, media, licensing, and distribution, the CEO kept these capabilities fragmented for the sake of competitiveness, internal competitiveness. Some of you listening might be agency people, and you know the scourge of the multiple P&L in an agency. And this is an attempt by agencies in their org chart and structure to create separate units that then compete not only with other agencies, but with each other for resources. There's a separate P&L in each group, and they need to often fight for resources, internal resources, fight for external clients. And the belief is that through that Darwinian competition, the entire organization is made more profitable. If you have one singular P&L for the entire organization, well, people get lazy, they're much less motivated, and the other team can carry more weight. It doesn't matter. It's kind of like pooling your tips among waiters in a restaurant. Everyone works a lot less hard is the assumption because they're less motivated for maximizing their own self-interest. But the result of this siloing and fragmentation in Sony's case was that they missed the opportunity for something like the iPhones and the iTunes platform. Jobs understood that users do not care about the technology. I go back to the opening statement of this pod. Users do not care about you. They care only about themselves. And what a user of the Walkman wanted, and what today's billions of customers of iPhones want, is a mobile, flexible distribution engine of content. And now, thanks to digital, it's interactive, dynamic, self selecting content. And Jobs saw this, he could see it. So, what he created was not a company that built the chassis of a high tech digital phone, literally a mobile computer. Not only that, but created the software, the operating system that ran it. And not only that, but created a platform for distributing content on that device. Boom, boom, boom. The trifecta of the integrated user experience. So when people are shopping for iPhones in 2025, you no longer, as a marketing maven or sales genius, need to focus too heavily on the pain points or needs of the user. Because everyone knows what an iPhone does, because it's already an integral, foundational, ubiquitous aspect of all of our lives. We check our phones hundreds of times per day. We laugh at surveys where people reveal they'd rather lose their house keys, get locked out of their office, lose their wallet, get robbed, than lose their iPhone. Our iPhones are, whether we like it or not, our conduit to all digital reality. And it's a result of Jobs recognizing this synergy between hardware, software, content, all wrapped into something that essentially becomes a part of our body. When we call a phone, we're calling a person, not a location. And when we use our phones, we are interacting directly with on demand services and social networks. And now, artificial intelligence to get what we want, to interact with content that we want, and to interact with friends, families, colleagues, coworkers. It is the hub of our lives. So when Apple releases the new iPhone, they don't need to sell consultatively. Everyone knows exactly what they're in for. So what they do is they do the opposite of what I'm recommending, which is they forego any of the pleasantries of building trust. Why? Because they've already built it. Understanding the needs of the customer, they have created the need for the customer. Jobs famously said, "We don't do any market research around here because customers don't even know what they want." Quoting Henry Ford, if you ask people what they want next, they'll tell you they want a faster horse. People don't know what a car is. Give them a car and then they go nuts. What was floating around in Jobs' head was this vision. And you can say he wasn't the first. Of course, he wasn't the first. Arthur C. Clarke, there's a great video on YouTube. It's something like 1952, and this guy is talking about, are you ready for it? The iPhone. So, news flash, it's not like Steve Jobs pulled this out of his ass, but he's the guy who made it happen. And he made it happen by believing in this holistic, singular vision of uniting hardware with software with distributed content. And then access to the web, and now, AI. Bravo. So, Apple, to come full circle here, does not have to sell consultatively. When you see an ad for the new iPhone, it's thinner than the other iPhone. It looks cooler. And maybe once they get their AI right, you're going to see ads that show cool shit. Shit you might not know about. Shit you didn't think the iPhone could or should do. And that's a heavier lift. And when Apple does that, they're smart people. One would assume that they're going to start selling a little bit more consultatively, which is, I didn't even know that I needed my phone to anticipate what I want to buy at the grocery store and dynamically create my list this week, or better still, integrate an AI agent to order my groceries automatically online from my phone. One of endless examples of what we're in store for. But what I'm getting at is consultative selling is when you need to engage customers with a value proposition of some sophistication, and you don't have a multi-trillion-dollar market cap and the transformation of society itself behind you. So unless you have the luxury, and frankly, if you ask me, the boredom of working as a marketing and communications strategist for Apple, then you're going to have to create relationships with your customers. And the only way to do that isn't to list bullet points of your product features on your website. It's not to start every sentence of every sales touch point with we, or I. Instead, it's about them and not you. You're asking questions. You're inquiring as to the why. And this makes sense cognitively, but for most salespeople, especially in complicated, technical, nuanced, scientific, healthcare, financial sectors, the temptation is enormous to start talking about the details of what you're offering before the customer even knows why the hell you're doing it. Why? Because you need to educate the customer, because your differentiation lies deep in the details. That if your customer really knew what the hell they wanted, they would realize that the triple click into your spec sheet, or the mechanism of action, or whatever the hell makes your product service unique in this nuanced, complicated way. If they only knew that, then you would sell your product better. But the exact opposite is true, because when you start talking about the details of how you think you're different, when you try to educate a customer who ostensibly isn't even quite sure why they're even talking to you yet, you short circuit the conversation before it begins, and at the very least, you open yourself up to a string of objections from that prospect, and the entire focus shifts from you asking them and probing and discovering what's on their mind and what keeps them up at night vis-a-vis to your potential solution. And instead, you barf out a bunch of information that immediately riles their feathers because why? Because you're not a commodity, because the decision to engage you comes with risk. And they are on the defensive. They are tired of being sold to, and instead, they want someone to partner with. So, step one of good consultative selling, especially if what you're selling is expensive, complicated, and nuanced, is to get over this initial hurdle and assumption that you need to prove yourself out of the gate and that you need to educate your customer and that the road to riches, or at least a good KPI or quarterly result, is a spec sheet or a long list of cool shit about what you're trying to sell. And the angle of attack that's proven to be expeditious, proven to work much better, is to turn that around and ask questions. And this goes to everything from the headlines in your website to any kind of sales collateral you're using to sales training with your salespeople. It's about opening up a dialogue, focusing all the energy on the customer, and leading the witness down a path toward the differentiated, beneficial product or service that will answer their questions and not merely satisfy your own instinct as a peacock to just spread your feathers and attract mates based on how fabulous you think you and your product and service clearly are. And in upcoming pods, we'll dive into the next steps, which include ways to query our customers, dig deeper into this trust factor. How do you get customers to open up about their ugly baby? How do you get them to display vulnerabilities and show you, not only tell you, but show you what keeps them up at night, what's broken with what they're doing, and what's getting in the way of their success? And once you discover these details, you are no longer selling them anything. You are solutioning their world in a way that you not only lead the witness, but you have learned so much about them that by the time you actually talk about the features, advantages, and certainly the benefits of what you're trying to ostensibly sell, they're on board. They're not objecting to the minutia, but they're trying to figure out how best to partner with you. So thank you for listening to the Bald Ambition podcast. I'm your host, Mookie Spitz. I'll be following up with more solo pods like this one on consultative selling, interspersed with more interviews from folks out there across all these different verticals who are selling consultatively with their own startups as entrepreneurs, and other folks who are boosting their own value proposition by staying flexible and adaptive and transitioning their careers using some of these techniques in arguably the most volatile and chaotic market that we've seen in generations. If you have any questions, click on the contact me link in the description. Thank you for listening. If you like it, comment and share, and way more to come.